Alrighty, back from the mass removal machine, the knife grinder that I use for this. Again, you can use any instrument, any tool that does the job. There's no rules regarding any of this kind of stuff. When cutting away rubber, vulcanite, ebonite, whatever you want to call it, I just find it's fast and painless and all that to let the electric motors do the work for me. So anyway, there's the first cut, as we would call it, meaning the top line and the bottom line are straight, and the bite zone behind the button here is about 1/4 of an inch thick, and we're going to be aiming for about 155-ish, 0.155. So we got about 1/10 of an inch on each side of this for safety margin. And I left about, a millimeter, thereabouts on the very top here and on the very bottom at the same point. For no other reason than I like to sneak up on stuff. And this was a 60 grit belt, and if you went dead level with that and found out that your line, after you got the thing all finished and it was dead flat, dead straight, you had a nick in it below the level of the straight line, you're SOL. So I've always preferred to sneak up on dimensions. Speaking of dimensions, now we don't have an original 838 stem to take our dimensions from, but I've worked on them before, and I know that they're exactly 6.5 inches long, maybe 1/16 of an inch longer. That's the amount that Dunhill allowed for variation between models with the same number on them. And this is an ODA 848 stem, and I remember checking it last time I made one of these things, and it is exactly the same width at the button as the 838 is. So we're gonna, I already have marked the end of that here and left a little bit of fudge factor on both sides of that as well. Probably, again, about 1 millimeter seems to be a good amount of extra material to leave. Now, if you're wondering about this kind of whimsical looking round button here, that's strictly a handling tool. I leave a little extra material on with regard to length so that I can use that as a handle when I'm manipulating the stem on that belt grinder. And at the last minute, so to speak, I'll just lop off the top, the bottom, and shorten it by about that much, and we're good to go. So that's just a handle for the short term. And the way to go after this next thing, after all of this painstaking layout of the tape, we're going to go back to the tape drawer, so to speak, or back to the tape technique, but we're going to do it this time by removing it. So drag a blade through it there and cut that off. And we should have everything gone that we need gone for the next step. Now, if I'm jumping around in the frame of this camera a little bit with this movement, my apologies. It's harder than I expected to keep my eye on two things at once. I'm trying to keep from slicing my fingers open with things like razor blades, while also maintaining a view of the viewfinder on the camera. So rather than cut myself from time to time, I'll move things around rather strangely, but such is the price of doing business. So off comes the side tape, and now we're going to go to within about 1 millimeter of this peak and that peak and connect it to the ends of the white bar. And then we'll have roughed in our stem with everything except these facet panels on the side, and that's when things get fun. Or actually, it's when we start approaching the final dimensions that things get fun, but you understand what I mean. So I'm now going to shut the camera off and go do that. Now, on earlier videos, you've seen this belt grinding machine called a Burr King that I use, but watching me use that doesn't do many of you much good for the simple reason that there aren't many out there. I know the guy who produces those machines in Warsaw, Missouri, and I know how many other pipe people he sold them to. And so there's, I know that most people are doing it using different machinery. Therefore, watching me do it is of no real benefit to you. It's more about the layout, and then you use whatever tools you have available to you to accomplish the things that I'm pointing out in the sequence that I'm illustrating them. I'm having a hell of a time with words on this, but anyway, I think you get the idea. This channel doesn't exist for views and all of that. It's strictly information, and from time to time I'll get tangled up in my words, as you have no doubt noticed, but I'm not going to worry about it, and I hope you're not either. So I'm going to go grind on this, be back in a minute. Okay, back from removing side material, and everything went as planned. So we're about 1 millimeter or maybe 1.5 millimeters from the wood on the shank side, or shank end, and we're just about up to the limits of this width indicator here, although the width thing has a little fudge factor built into it too. Remember, these are straight line, completely straight lines that we're working on. In any sort of a nick from the edge of a belt or a slip from a rasp or something, and you're in trouble. So keep that in mind. Also, I encourage you, as a matter of learning, gaining skills doing this, that there's one thing that I always strove to do, and now it's just habit, even though I could probably get away without doing it, which is hit your marks. And by that I mean, if you lay out something like this and it's going to have straight sides, even though the straight side that it's going to have is another millimeter farther into the rubber, on the way there you're going to have stopping points. And the stopping points are, you should make things accurate at each of these index points as you approach your goal. And it's twofold. One is it allows you to work with confidence from that point on. And the other thing is it's skills developing technique, because here you're going to be shooting for a perfectly straight line on the top and on the sides when you don't have to. But that extra 20 seconds or 45 seconds or whatever that you spend doing that counts toward your 10,000 hours to mastery, and you learn your tools doing that. So at every step of the way, shoot for perfection as the stem shrinks in size and approaches its final dimensions. So next up, I'm not quite decided yet. Let me think just how I want to proceed, and then I will turn the camera back on.